Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of SEO from Home. My name is Ben Jacobson. I am your host, as well as the digital marketing strategist here at Page One Power. And as I mentioned, we're back with another episode of SEO from Home today. Today is going to be a little bit different. We're actually joined by a very special guest panel of all Page One Power specialists here. We're going to be joined by Colby Stream, who is a project manager here at Page One Power, with Michael Johnson, who is our sales manager. And then we also have Frank Amy Lyons from our content team that are going to be answering questions. And today we are going to be talking about how to set up your content strategy for 2021. As we're kind of rounding the end of the year here, I think what's next is on a lot of people's mind. And so today we're going to be talking about just that. So we're going to be having kind of a roundtable discussion here today with these folks and kind of answering your questions and maybe answering some of our own questions as well as we kind of go through today. So as we get started, I just wanted to get a couple things out of the way here. If you guys haven't seen SEO from Home before, the idea of this series is essentially to sit down with a lot of different SEO professionals and marketing specialists from across the industry and sit down and talk with them about a variety of different topics inside of marketing and SEO. Sometimes we talk about really actionable stuff. Sometimes we talk more psychology and kind of the why behind things. But ultimately, at the end of the day, we always try to provide some sort of actionable takeaway for you guys. So that's what we're going to try to be doing here today. I also wanted to tell you, we are actually now launching one of our new end of the year promos. So I wanted to tell you guys about that real quick before we get started. For super limited time, just through the end of the year, we're actually going to be doing a free content blueprint, which is like a $1,500 value. With any of our new link building campaigns. So if that's something that you guys are interested in, I'm just going to pop up real quick. Man, if I can remember how to do it, I'm going to pop up real quick here the poll. And if you guys are interested in learning more about that, just click yes, and we can actually get back in touch with you later. So that way you don't have to like jump out in the middle of the webinar today. So all of that being said, we're super excited today. As I mentioned at the top, Michael's going to be talking with us today about how you guys can use the rest of your end of the year budget in order to kind of help start to lay the groundwork for your strategy going into 2021. So that being said, Michael, tell us a little bit more about what we're going to be talking about today.
Yeah. So, in my role, I talk to hundreds of prospects every year. We usually come, they want links. They want to dive right into getting quality organic backlinks. And so often people forget that to get links, you have to have great content. We use the phrase all the time in our organization, your links will be as good as your content. And so one of the things that I have seen is that at the end of the year, some companies will come to us and they want to splash all their budget and just do like a big blast of links and see what will happen. And often I'm of the opinion, while I love links just as much as anybody else out there, I also think that you should take that time to, and especially if you are lacking in some certain areas in your content strategy, take the time to assess your content strategy, find and identify gaps that might be existing, whether it's, hey, we're having a really hard time earning links to begin with. Well, maybe that's an issue with content you should be looking into, or maybe we're not able to drive a lot of traffic with our content. Well, maybe there's a keyword research or on-page optimization issue that you're experiencing. So that's part of why today I wanted to get together and bring some specialists from here at Page One Power who are experts on content and have a conversation and answer questions. Number one, some questions that we get every day, but then also questions from the audience about content strategies that we can help you get you on the right track heading into 2021 from a content strategy perspective.
Awesome. I love it. Well, I think we're super excited to get started. I'm just going to jump right into it and kind of get the first question and the ball rolling here. One of the questions that we wanted to start out with was this: what kind of things do you look for when you're assessing to see if a pre-existing piece of content is worth linking to? So let's say that, for example, you have something that you had on your site and you had a lot of work and a lot of effort put into it. How do you actually find out if that's something that's going to be link worthy? Let's start with Michael. Let's just jump right in with you.
Yeah, I'll just jump right in. I mean, for myself, when I'm speaking with a client and they send me over some examples of content they'd want to get links to, I always start with 3 questions. Number one is, who would link to this piece. So you got to think about like the audiences that you want to try to get links from. And then I think about why would they link to this piece, right? Is there a reason or a value that your piece provides? And then last, what makes your page different to other pages that are similar on the web, or why is yours the best or better? So those are some things that I start to think about, questions that I ask. And those can really help to kind of start guiding people on, well, is this piece actually link worthy or is it not?
Yeah, excellent. Katie, what about you? When you're going through and you have clients that are trying to figure out what's going on, how do you what's your vetting process look like, I guess?
Well, for me, I work a lot with like internal links and external links. And so kind of vetting for those external links, I want to be looking for like, making sure that my content has authoritative resources and making sure that like I can prove my point with like statistics or anything like that. Internal links, we're looking for that keyword rich anchor text that can help use those keyword signals. So then search engines can, crawl and index a little better. So that's kind of what I'm looking for when I'm writing a piece or creating outlines or anything like that.
Awesome. And Amy, what about you?
So Michael commented earlier about content blueprints and kind of looking over like pre-existing content on a client's site. And one of the things that I use is sort of like a conceptual tool that we call the content funnel. And so whenever I'm looking at pre-existing content on someone else's site, I am first and foremost kind of trying to organize what type of content they have. And linkable content is sort of the content that lives in that top funnel where it's most applicable to as many niches as possible. So linkable, if a piece of content is linkable, typically it doesn't have a KPI that focuses specifically on keywords. We're looking for things that are able to be used for different niches with different audiences where people are going to find value in that piece and want to link it on their website.
So more broad appeal than just specific ultra niche. Got it. Okay. Colby, what about you? I mean, you're obviously coming from a lot different perspective because you're actually our project managers at Page One Power, just to kind of give you guys some insight maybe. They're the direct go-between for our clients, and like what Amy and Katie do here is they're actually out there talking with the clients directly. So Colby, where do you kind of see that intersection happen with your clients and with our own content team on finding what is actually going to be a linkable piece of content?
Yeah, and I'm gonna get to that, but I wanted to take a little bit of what Amy said a little farther, because she's right that when we're looking at content for linkability from like we're building guest post links, they're really looking at what are some like one piece that can be written about in like several different niches. My job is to I work with not just that team, but also with the resource link building team where they're really pitching cold. And then they're leaning a little more towards, hey, what community is really going to care about this? And some often thought of communities, right, are like a veteran community, seniors as a community, LGBTQ, diversity, those sort of things. Like those are big communities online where we're thinking about, hey, we can pitch to them and say, hey, you should link to this. This is a great resource. Now, in terms of, my job is to really say like to the clients, sometimes that community or even the places that like Katie and Amy are looking at saying, hey, we can write in these spaces. Sometimes they don't always line up exactly with like, hey, I'm trying to sell to, people in the IT space who are like MSPs. So we had a case study you can go check out on the website for Atera, who we've worked with now for a year. Like they cater really to like IT professionals, MSP. It's like, how do you make those things line up? And in that case, we actually did go something in the veteran space, but we try to find that intersect between like veterans are people who have left a job in the military and they're now transitioning into the civil space. In that case, we wrote something about veterans transitioning into IT, something you see a whole lot. And so that's something we really have to look for is how can we be in those communities or across these different niches in a way that will speak to, you know, an audience who might be interested with the content on the client site. And as Amy alluded to, maybe everybody that we're writing to in there isn't going to convert, but that's the point of a marketing funnel, is that you start big up here and it comes down here. And so you have to be okay with saying, yes, some of my audience is being hit up here, but not everybody of my, you know, it's going to be people outside of my audience.
Yeah, and I think it's, I mean, to that point, you have to have a little bit of that broad appeal, because there's going to be people that are not inside of your quote unquote target demographic or your audience that you're looking for, but are also going to still be great customers. I mean, you can research as much as you want, and, you know, until the cows come home, as they say, but that doesn't necessarily always mean that you're going to have like the perfect match and the perfect pair when you get to the outset. Sometimes you might drive a bunch of traffic to a certain resource, but that traffic, or the audience that's building that traffic, isn't actually a converting audience, and that's really tough to tell. With the research that's going into that, that actually parlays really well into our next question, which is, what are the best ways to discover keyword opportunities for content creation? So how do you discover these opportunities that you're talking about, Colby? Because you, as you mentioned, you want to make sure that you're providing something to your audience that is going to be valuable while still having that broad appeal. How do you do the actual legwork of the research to find out where you're going to land, hopefully, before you actually get started on the campaign and invest all your money?
Well, we should jump over to Amy and Katie here in a minute, but I will say, from a project manager perspective, I will add two things to the conversation. The first is to really hit on again what Amy said, which is that different pieces of content have different KPIs. And so we do produce some content that really the KPI is not what are the keywords that really matter for this, but how many links can it get? So I don't want to, you know, I don't want to give the impression that every piece of content that we write is really backed by a ton of keyword research. For sure, there's some, but it's really like the KPI is links. Now, for the stuff where the KPI is keyword research, a lot of that starts with competitors and with in the SERPs. And so we'll use, you really can use a couple different tools, and you should use a couple different tools. SEMrush is a really good one, right? It's a really easy one to see search competitors. And I think Katie and Amy can probably talk about, hey, when we're looking at that, here's some of the stuff we look at. Another one that I think works really well is I'll have clients send me AdWords keywords, right? Like I had a client, we put together a content roadmap, and he came back with like, hey, I want to rank for these keywords. And really the impression was like, go redo this content roadmap for these keywords directly. And, you know, so my job as a project manager, the thing I put together is to say, hey, let's go look at your competitors and find out who is ranking and what is ranking. And in that, what happened there was actually for me to go back to them and say, hey, you need to build converting pages for these directly, and then we will build the mid and top funnel, you know, the mid and the linkable funnel to support those. But sorry, I'm just looking back over your question, and really you ask about discovering keyword opportunities. I think at the end of the day, that starts with looking at competitors. It starts in SEMrush and a tool like that. And that's really, I think probably Katie and Amy, you dig more into that than I do on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, let's jump over to Katie. Tell us a little bit more along that same thread. How is it that you personally go about trying to find some of these opportunities? Can you maybe give us kind of like a general run through of what that would kind of look like?
Sure. Well, when I'm creating keyword outlines, I first look at what the client ranks for. And then I look at what their direct competitors rank for, and I try to find these gaps and see if there's any opportunity to help them close those competitor gaps. So I use a tool, SEMrush is really good for that. And so what I'll do is I'll look and see what their content is ranking for. So like their highest ranking content as well, and then what their keywords are, and then see if, and then I'll just look for keywords that are related to that. honestly. Like, and then if there's any huge search volume, I'll try and, you know, dig my way deeper and see if I can come up with a piece of content that will help the client with their goal.
Absolutely. So, and let's jump over to Amy. One thing that kind of comes to my mind is if you're looking at, let's say that you're trying to go after a competitor who's ranking clearly #1 spot. They have all the authority in the space. If you're trying to maybe perhaps boost them out of that top spot, or you're trying to fight for that top spot, what sort of things do you look at as like attainable? Like, clearly you're not going to knock, you know, Facebook off of the #1 spot for social media apps. Like, how is it that you find, or what things do you look into that you can maybe look at as like an attainable goal for your client? Amy, let's jump over to you. Like, do you have like certain parameters that maybe you put on yourself, or anything like that that maybe kind of helps guide your search along the way?
So I think there's a few things that play into this conversation, and that is that if you are trying to compete with someone who is sort of just like slaying it in the SERPs, you are really going to have to go through their content and make sure that you are owning all of the same keyword spaces that they're occupying. So to do that, you need to create content that is comparable, if not more comprehensive and better than what already exists on your competitor's site. To do that, oftentimes you're not just going to look at their content, you're going to use SEMrush, like Katie said. I live there when I'm looking at keyword research. Like, that's just one thing you're going to have to do, is a lot of like analysis and research to figure out what you need. But also, just because someone is ranking for their keyword portfolio doesn't always necessarily mean that they have the best content. That there are a lot of factors that play into someone ranking in those top spaces, which could also play into things like their domain authority, how long their website has existed. There are different things going on there. So I would say that one thing that you for sure need to do is make sure you're occupying all those same spaces. And then you need to do further research to make sure that the content you're creating is the most comprehensive at addressing not just like creating authority around those keywords, but also how carefully you can actually answer the query of someone's search, because that's what a keyword is a lot of times, pretty much, is just how someone is asking a question. And that keyword is the most important part of that question. So you're building authority not just with that keyword, but around that keyword too. So if you sell hand sanitizer, you're going to want to own everything that has to do with sanitizing. Additionally, you're probably also going to have to extend outside of that very specific keyword focus. And you're going to need to start looking at things like, okay, well, if I define what sanitizing is, then maybe I need to define what disinfecting is, because it's not the same thing. And talking about disinfecting, you are showing that you have authority around this entire conversation about what sanitizing is. So I think those are a few things that I keep in mind. I don't know, did I answer your question properly?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that that's a really good point, because what you were saying earlier, like, if you are only focusing on ranking for hand sanitizer, like, you're missing out on a lot, because there are almost an infinite amount of different ways to propose a search for trying to find hand sanitizer. There are so many. You can say, I need hand sanitizer near me right now. You can say, I need Purell, I need a certain brand, I need soap. Like, there's a lot that can branch out in that. And if you're only focusing on one thing, man, even if you get that to rank the #1 spot, you're still missing out on gobs and gobs of traffic. Like, there's still so much more opportunity there. Michael, let's jump over to you real quick. I know that you have just a different perspective on this just because of, again, you're talking with clients from the very jump at the very beginning. How is it that you are kind of helping them analyze what content they have, their strategy, and how to move forward from there?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, one thing Amy said that I love was she kind of touched on that idea of topical authority, right? Like just showing that your brand is an expert on the subject matter that you're specializing in, that you're working on. And so often people still have this like 2012, 2011 view of content that it's like, I want to rank for this keyword, so I just need to create one article about this keyword, the title tag and the H1s, and cram my keyword on the page a few times, and I can rank for this. And it's like, no, like Google's job has always been the best page that provides the best answers to you on the web. And part of providing the best answers is providing the best sources and the most expert, the expert sources. And so you need to show Google that your website is an expert on these topics. And if you just have one page that talks about that one subject, your website's not a great, not the best expert on that topic. So I like that idea, just overall establishing that topical authority by having a wealth of content talking about those different related subjects. But in terms of what I'm doing when I'm first talking to prospects, one of the things I always do is SEMrush. You can tell across the board at our company, we're big fans of SEMrush, but I'll dive in there. And what we do is we export data from SEMrush and we turn it into pivot tables. And I'll start to just kind of create pivot tables for all of my prospects' competitors to see what pages they're using to rank for certain kinds of keywords. Then from there, start to figure out what pages do they have that my prospect is missing. Maybe there's a search intent issue. Maybe they're addressing search intent a different way with some of their content pieces. My prospect isn't. And so it really, and Katie kind of talked about analyzing gaps and identifying gaps. That's really what I seek to do with a lot of my keyword research, is do competitor and industry research to identify where those gaps lie, whether it's a links issue, whether it's a on-page optimization issue, whether you're just not getting the keywords that you should be because your competitors have and you don't. And from there, try to lay out that plan on how we can close those different gaps through the different services.
I think that's a really good approach. And you mentioned something earlier that I wanted to kind of key in on, and that was the idea behind search intent. I think so often that we get caught up in like trying to find specific keywords, or like saying, oh, well, I need to rank for Honda car sales in Tacoma, Washington. Like, I think that so often anyone in marketing kind of gets caught up, like especially once you get into the thick of a campaign, I feel like we kind of get sucked into that. You mentioned more about search intent. Can you tell us a little bit more about search intent and how you kind of determine what true intent is for the people that are searching for your query?
Yeah, I mean, so one of the first things I do is, if there's a keyword someone really wants to rank for, and one of the examples I look at is there's this company that I was talking to a long time ago that they are a company that does account-based marketing, and they have a platform for account-based marketing. You'd probably assume they would love to rank for the keyword account-based marketing. However, the only page that they had that really addressed that keyword was their product page for their platform. But when all I did was Google the words account-based marketing, and all of a sudden you can quickly see what Google's doing, the intent of searches. You see all these informational articles about what is account-based marketing, the guide to account-based marketing. All of these are informational articles, not trying to sell products. So right away, just by searching the keyword and looking what currently ranks, you can tell this is an informational query. Google's not wanting to return products for this. They don't think people are looking to buy something. They just want to learn. So that's that client then at that moment can see, okay, if we want to rank for this keyword, we're doing it with the wrong page. You can build all the links in the world to that page and it's not going to rank. You need to create the right page that aligns with what Google wants to rank.
Yeah, and that's a good point. I think even I was in a Facebook group about SEO the other day, and they were talking about the relevance of headers. And someone was asking the point of like, okay, well, are H1s really even relevant anymore? And of course, everyone's like, okay, well, yeah, of course, H1s are relevant. But at the same time, like there's proof that Google pretty much makes up what it figures out it wants it to be. Like that was a weird way of phrasing that, but essentially like Google will like, it'll be like, your H1 kind of sucks. Like this is really what it's about. They can use like machine learning to actually understand the context of what's happening on the page. And even if you have a poorly written H1, like there are instances where Google can just completely ignore what your H1 is and be like, no, this isn't about London train schedule. This is about XY. Like there's so much there where you need to look at what Google is understanding it to be, because I mean, let's face it, Google's our master at this point, kind of like we need to understand what it's thinking, and we need to play ball there. Let me actually ask Amy and Katie. I'll ask both of you guys just because, and Amy, you actually were wanting to jump in, but tell me, like, how do you see the intent, and how do you like how do you derive the two, and how do you like kind of separate out the intent behind what you think the intent is?
I was just gonna make a point that, like, yes, while you're also trying to figure out how Google understands the searcher intent of your keywords, I think one of the things that we also need to really bring to light and focus on is really paying attention to what the actual searcher intent is, like what the person who is writing the query is thinking when they write that query. And I think we do that honestly through like critical thinking and creativity. So when you're looking at a list of keywords or long tail queries, you are trying to discover what that person is actually looking for, what they actually want with that phrasing and however they phrase it. So I think understanding searcher intent is doing a deeper dive beyond just reading the word and trying to find a way to like contextualize what the person is asking. And I think that this kind of stems back to the conversation we just had about, like, Ben, when you mentioned like, oh, well, when you talk about hand sanitizing, what does that mean? Does that mean I want hand sanitizer right now? Does that mean I want Purell? Does that mean like all those types of things? That could also mean like if someone just types in the word sanitize hands, that could mean like I need sanitizer. That could also mean, what does hand sanitizing mean? How do I sanitize my hands? Do I need to wash my hands? Do I need to disinfect my hands?
Could be a news article. Like there's so much. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think
it could be looking for DIY.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think a lot of that really plays into like your ability to creatively and critically think about what the person is asking, and then do your best to deliver what you think that person is asking. And what we think should happen with Google is that if you can answer that question most like accurately and comprehensively, that's when you're going to increase your chances of ranking.
Yeah, agreed. Katie, did you want to add anything to that?
I think that was very well spoken, Amy. I think searcher intent is just it's very easy to get like multiple searcher intents mixed up in a piece of content. So I think it's very, very important to, like Amy said, like think critically, like really understand what you're trying to accomplish with this piece of content, because if you start mixing searcher intents, I think readers are going to get confused, Google's going to get confused. And so and it can be so easy, like for example, like if you're looking for like types of mattresses, and then all of a sudden you start talking about like how to clean one in an you know in an article, it's kind of, you're like, okay, I can see how this is related, but kind of not what I was looking. It's not what I was looking for. I was just looking for types of like different types of mattresses. So you can see how it's related. It's very close. I get it, but like they are definitely different searcher intents. And so even little things like that, it's very important to be aware of.
So maybe, and you know, I haven't spent very much time. I definitely have done a lot more on like the research link building side of things. So I'm not as familiar with like the content strategy of that. So tell me like, maybe for other people that might be in my similar position, like how do you actually understand intent with something that is so, let's use hand sanitizer. I think that's a great example because there has been, obviously because of pandemic, there has been a massive influx of people searching and or interacting with that term in a number of different ways online. So if you are trying to understand the search keyword hand sanitizer, and you're trying to understand what the true intention of the bulk of people are searching that for, how do you actually derive that intent when you don't have necessarily long historical data and a lot of like really high ranking articles that Google's had time to kind of suss through? Do you have like any recommendations or maybe just tips or tricks, or is it just kind of like a gut feeling?
It can totally, oh, sorry, Amy.
No, Katie, go.
It can sometimes it's a gut feeling, but a lot of times like looking at the title tags in the SERPs and just seeing the answers that come up when you type in hand sanitizer, that can kind of lead you to what people are thinking. And so like say the SERPs, a majority of the SERPs are going to be like the best hand sanitizer, what, or blah 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 of like 2020 or whatever. You can be like, okay, people are trying to find the most like powerful or the best hand sanitizer, like, so it's a good thing, it's a good idea that this is a big search query. So it's a good idea to know, it's a good idea to say like, okay, people are interested in that.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think that's maybe something that I guess I didn't really even think about, is if you're seeing like a listicle type thing where it's like the top 10, like that's a pretty good indicator that like a lot of people are researching that right there. And that, I mean, points back to what you just mentioned, like critical thinking, like just use your brain. Like, what does it seem like? And that seems like, in retrospect, like saying, oh, there's top 10 hand sanitizers, is like, oh yeah, of course that means that there's a lot of an interest there. But on its face, like if you're not actually looking at it through that perspective, that could be a very easy thing to miss. Yeah, I love that. That's a great way of looking at it, I think.
Can I piggyback really quick on Katie's comment?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think Katie totally nailed it when she said that you need to start jumping into the SERP. Like that is when you start transitioning from all of your like research data, and then you start looking for what is actually ranking, what are people looking for, all of that. And I just wanted to circle that back into what are the best ways to discover keyword opportunities for content creation. Because if you start looking at the SERPs and you're like, oh, well, what they're looking for is listicles. Well, maybe for this round, you write a listicle specifically to build authority on that keyword, but then you also know that you have opportunities to contextualize that keyword in other ways. So you can build that piece that talks about, 10 best hand sanitizers or whatever, but then you also have the opportunity to say, okay, well, how can I deepen my authority on this subject? How can I deepen my authority on this keyword? And that also gives you opportunities for other keyword content creation that continues to contextualize your trustworthiness on that subject.
Agreed. And I think it's, I think that if you are looking at your strategy and you're trying to find, hey, I'm trying to break into the hand sanitizer space, and you're looking at it and you say, okay, well, there's a listicle, and I can build this listicle and I'm going to rank. I think there's people that are still, like to Michael's point, still in that 2012 mindset where it's like, oh, I just need to build one article and I'm good. But I think that the thing that I'm starting to notice now is just everyone's on their game. Like really, like at the end of the day, like everyone is stepping it up. You can't get by with just kind of like phoning it in anymore. Like you can't just put up a top 10 listicle and think that you're going to be on page one. Like it just shows that like there's an army of content and information that has to happen in order to provide a solid approach. It's like if you're going into a battle, like you don't want to send just one guy that's your best guy out there and be like, all right, well, hopefully we win the war because we got our best guy out there. Like, no, you need support. Katie, what were you wanted to say something?
Well, just to like reiterate something that Michael had said, like right at the beginning, I think that really having that unique take in content is so important, and that's what can help your content stick out from others.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because I mean, if I hear Michael talk about building another mortgage calculator link, I gotta steal your line there, Michael. But for real, like there's so many mortgage calculators. There's so many like find out what you qualify. Like there's so many of those out there that you're kind of like beating a dead horse if you're trying to pitch something like that, unless your tool is like groundbreaking and you got people asking you how you're doing it. Like you're probably, going to be talking to an empty room if you're trying to pitch a resource like that. It has to have some unique value to it. If you do a Google search and you're trying to figure out how to, if you're trying to figure out how to wash wine out of, your blanket or something, and you have 30 articles that are all exactly the same, like how are you going to stand out from that? Like it might not be in the cards for you, honestly. Like sometimes there's just opportunities that will not present themselves no matter how hard you try. With creating content, is there and we'll stick with you, Katie, is there something that you've noticed as far as like a time frame that you should expect? I know that one of the common questions that I'm sure Colby and Michael, and I'm sure you guys probably hear it too all the time, is how long is it going to be before this article is actually going to have an impact and help me rank? So let's say that you're out there and we're talking with our clients and they're saying, okay, I understand that I need an approach and I need more content and I need some supporting content. What kind of time frame should people be looking at? And what kind of turnaround are you seeing that, between the point of realizing you have an opportunity to actually seeing some results? We'll kind of jump around. I'm sure Colby and Michael will probably be a little bit more apt to answer that, but are you guys kind of seeing a specific area, or is there any kind of like rule of thumb, anything like that you're seeing? Let's actually jump over to Michael. You'll probably actually be one of the better ones to answer that, just since you're...
I've got the authoritative answer, the answer of all answers for how long it takes to rank a piece of content. So if you're listening, here's the secret.
Take out your
it's 2 words. Take notes. It depends. There you go. No, yeah, it completely depends. I mean, like we get that question all the time. Like, hey, can we see results in 3 months? Can we see results in 6 months? And the questions are always, it applies to anything. Links, a piece of content. If I tweak my on-page SEO, when will I see results? And the answer is it always depends. It depends on your competition. It depends on your own website, where you're starting from. There's so many different factors that can play a role in it. And even with the search intent, if you have a page that's just never going to rank for a keyword, you're trying to, get across the Pacific in a rowboat at that point. It doesn't matter. You're not going to be able to get where you're trying to go. So yeah, it really just depends on a lot of different factors. But one of the things you can do to maybe give yourself a ballpark idea is by doing really good competitor and industry research to see what is working, how are the people who are currently ranking, how did they get there, and why are they where they're at? And that can maybe help to give you a general idea. But even then, there's no sure bets. There's no guarantees. There's a lot of different reasons why Google selects certain pages to rank for certain keywords.
Definitely. So we kind of talked about tools. I wanted to definitely make sure that we're providing kind of some real note-taking, tangible takeaways for a couple people joining in. So throughout the process, we've mentioned a couple different things. We're using Google. We're actually checking the SERPs. We'd made mention of SEMrush. Are there any other tools that you're using along the way to help kind of build your strategy and help make sure that you're on the right path? I think one thing that people might be concerned about is, okay, this is a huge undertaking of time and effort. And to your last comment there, Michael, it depends. Like, is there a way that we can kind of check our work along the way? Are there tools that you might recommend for people to keep an eye on as we're going through the campaign to make sure that they're getting the best results for their efforts?
Yeah, I mean, I'll use a few different tools myself, just in my preliminary research I do when putting together a proposal. I do deep dives into SEMrush data. I use like Moz or Majestic to look into backlinks. And I like to use different tools to look at backlinks because different tools have different indexes. That's one of the reasons why I hate people to put too much focus on like DA or page authority or DR or all those different things. It's, every tool can have their own index of links and their own things that are determining how they are arbitrarily viewing the authority of a site, to where, I think if you get a few different tools, you can get a few different perspectives. And so that's what I like to do in mind. But I'd love to hear from, Amy, Katie, and Colby in terms of like the production size, what they do, because I know they probably have a few different approaches to things once they're in the thick of it.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I'd like to answer this and the last one, because the depends answer is like realistic, but page one power keyword content will generally start attaining some rankings within 4 weeks. Now, when I say that, I mean the super relevant keywords, the keywords we targeted that for, are ranking in the 60 to 80 positions, right? So it's not the sort of thing that is really driving traffic, but it's moving in the right direction. And then somewhere in that 3 to 5 month range is when we'll really start to see, hey, this is sending clicks and clicks in a way that makes sense, or that matters, I guess. And so we've mentioned SEMrush. I'll come back to that in a second, but really I think the best tool for that is Google Search Console. Because Google Search Console is going to give you, if not exact, there's sort of quibbles about, does it give you all the data? It gives you directionally accurate data. And I can see for clients that we've written keyword content for, I can see, that about 4 weeks in, like really relevant keywords that make sense for that article and for the audience are starting to rank. And then I can show, roughly 28 days later, that ranking is higher. And then I can show, 28 days later, like impressions are there and clicks are starting to show up. And so I don't really rely usually on Google Analytics for that. I rely on Google Search Console because it's clicks. That's what it shows you: impressions, clicks, rankings. And then SEMrush does a reasonably good job where what you can do is you can export keyword data for either a page or a site across multiple months. So I was actually doing it for a client right before this. Export February, export March, May, June, July, and then you take all the keywords, throw them into a column, deduplicate, and then you can do a VLOOKUP for the rankings for each month. So you can see, you can segment that down by page, you can keep it across the entire domain. But the advantage that SEMrush has is it'll sometimes pick up keywords like in that 60 to 100 range that maybe Google Search Console hasn't yet because of the specific way in which Google Search Console is pulling the data. So it can give you like a pretty early indication of things that might show up in Google Search Console in another 30 days.
Just because Google Search Console is basing it off of actual clicks and not as many people are going to be clicking on links that deep. Is that what you're
you do get, Google Search Console will show you impressions. And the way that they will do that is like if someone actually gets to that page. I'm not completely clear. I'm not like a Google Search Console expert. But yeah, it just has to do with the case, like you have to be there enough. And the way you can see that is when you export from Google Search Console, you'll see like stuff with 0 clicks, but it's showing some of the impressions. And it has to do with how deep you are in the page. Whereas SEMrush is actually just, I don't know how they do it, but my impression of how they do it is that like, basically it's like me Googling the search term and then saying, here's where everyone is ranking. And they're averaging that over, the month.
Gotcha. Perfect. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think that it's important to be able to analyze those from different perspectives too. That's a really good point about the difference between SEMrush and Search Console, because yeah, I think that getting the closest to the most accurate information is always going to give you just a slight advantage if you can. It might be immeasurable, but hopefully it's something that over the course of enough time really kind of puts us ahead a little bit there. We are about 45 minutes into this, so we're sitting at a really good spot. We have one last question. I'm going to kind of allow each of you guys to answer this a little bit, but tell us maybe in your own words, or if you were to offer some advice, maybe some best practices that you've seen or that you recommend to our clients for internal linking. So let's start with Michael. If you have any ideas or any best practices or tips that you want to share, we'll kind of close on that final note there, and we'll get things going, wrapped up.
Yeah, I mean, just for internal linking, it's been really interesting to me the last few months in like kind of SEO Twitter world. I've seen a lot more people talk about internal linking and talk about how it's such an underrated part of SEO. And I really agree with it, because internal linking those are the links that you have control over. And so if you, within your own content, aren't internally linking to other pages on your site, or you have pages on your site that aren't getting internal links, what does that tell to Google about how you feel about that page on your site? If it's not important enough to you to link to it, you got to think about those kinds of things. Also, we've seen so many campaigns time and time again. People come to us, they want to get links to a specific page that just is not link worthy, whether it's a product page, whether it's a very niche specific keyword page that's just not a big audience for it. And we build out comprehensive content strategies with informational, educational pieces that are, opening up their site to a lot of different audiences. But we create content that provides that relevant tie between those, outside audiences and the product page. And we use that content as a way to do it. And the real, for lack of a better phrase, the real link between those two things are internal links. Mm-hmm. And so, I think internal linking is such an important part of SEO. And as you're trying to influence pages that are hard to get links to, internal links and using your linkable assets, internal links from those are such a critical part of then being able to influence those pages and help support them.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, it kind of reminds me a little bit of what I was alluding to earlier. Like if you're going into battle and you want to send all your pieces out there, you want to make sure that they're all connected, they're all talking to each other. It's kind of that same analogy that you don't want to just send out 50 rogue people going out and just doing their own thing. Like you want to make sure that they're all helping provide and accomplish the same mission, which is trying to help get that main ultra relevant, super rich piece of content to the top. What about Amy, when you guys are going through and you're working on creating articles, what's your take as far as like best practices to help with internal linking? Are you able to kind of see anything or provide any tips or tricks along the way to help with internal linking?
Absolutely. So when I'm ideating or generating content, I kind of try to think about internal links operating within the website almost like a spider web. Like everything needs to be interconnected to hold up everything else and to get you to that center point. So when you're thinking about best practices for internal linking, you should definitely have like your main target pages in there, but you also are going to need to consider all of the other like supplementary content that you've built to really reinforce and create those little tiny pieces of webbing in between those big major strands. You want everything to connect and come together in the middle, which should ultimately be the page that you are focusing on, that you're trying to bolster. Additionally, for best practices for internal linking, I can't even like express how important this is, but be sure that you are using natural contextual placement of those links, that you are including them in worthy places, that your anchor text is optimized, not just for your reader, but also for the search engine. So if you're reading along and you see that little blue line pop up and you know it's a link, you feel more trustworthy if that link basically describes, that anchor text describes where that link is going to take you. Mm-hmm. If you end up landing in some random page that is not associated with what that anchor text says or doesn't do the job that it's supposed to do, not only are you doing a disservice to your reader, but the bots will figure that out. So that's really something that you need to pay attention to.
I can't tell you the number of times I've hovered on a link and looked in the bottom left corner to see where it's taken me to and be like, I don't want to cancel.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Make it relevant. Make it something that people are interested in. If they are clicking on it, they're like, that's what I was looking for. Again, I think so much with SEO just boils down to like design for people. Like the bots will figure everything else out. Like your best golden rule is like, make it so that if your mom was going to the website, she'd be able to be like, oh, cool, there it is. Like that's really like kind of your litmus test, is you want to make sure that it's like obvious, clear, not confusing. You don't want it to be like, and click on this link and it's just titled link. Like that doesn't help you anyway. Like that's not going to guide people in the right direction. Sure, the context around it might help tell you what it's about, but Google needs to know a little bit more, and the surrounding anchor text is part of what it understands. But I think the more obvious and the more foolproof you can make it, then the better off you're going to be long term.
Best advice ever is to never, ever use a link that just says click here.
That's probably pretty solid advice. Cool. Katie, did you have anything else to add to that? I wanted to give you a chance to add in if you'd like.
Sure. Just a cool way to like look for internal links pretty quickly. Just site search. That's what I'll usually do when I'm looking for internal links. Like if I'm doing strategy or anything like that, I'll kind of take a whole bunch that are related to like the keyword that I'm using or anything, like what talks about this topic in another way or whatever. Mm-hmm. And then after I compile that list, then I'll be like, okay, what can I use naturally in my article? What won't be such a stretch that like, it'll just look out of place or anything like that. So I think the site search really comes in clutch for especially if the blog is like very hard to navigate or anything like that. So
yeah, that's an excellent point. Colby, do you have anything to add as we kind of get this wrapped up?
I think the only thing I would add is maybe the other side of the coin, which is like internal linking at a broad scale. So Amy and Katie have both talked about, when I'm writing an article, how do I know where I'm linking to and what makes sense? It benefits you probably to take every 6 months or whatever to crawl your site with Screaming Frog and look for, you can extract custom keywords, right? That you've said, hey, these keywords are, like this page really matters. And these are like the 3 keywords that really matter to it. And I'm going to crawl my site and look for other articles that include those and include internal links back to that. That's a pretty good tactic to run every 6 months. I was going to say 12, but I really wouldn't make it every 12. Like part of SEO is about optimization, right? That's what it is. And there's a lot of maintenance in that. And that's a good way to approach internal linking every once in a while, so there's that micro and then that macro, and you should be doing both.
Perfect. I think that's an excellent point to end on. You guys, I think that we are wrapping up. That was almost exact perfect timing. We're at 10:54 here locally, so we're just about at the top of the hour. You guys, that was fantastic. Thank you so much for being able to join us and sharing your wealth of knowledge with everyone. That was great. Thank you guys for being a part of it so much. We are going to, next week we will be off, so we won't have another SEO from home next week, but we do have more in the works coming right now. So you guys, we're super excited to announce those, so stay tuned for those. Again, we're going to have this recording available, so if you guys had to step out for any reason, we'll have that up on our site, typically in about 24 to 48 hours. Yeah, thank you guys so much for joining us. Thanks. Michael, Colby, Amy, Katie, you guys, thank you so much. I appreciate you guys being willing to hop on and let me ask you some questions. So we'll see you guys again soon. Thank you again. Stay safe out there, and we'll see you guys next time.